Do you guys like really good fantasy books? Do you guys like reading hundreds of mysterious pages that are incredibly entertaining, only to get to page 290 and find out that it was all a lie? Kind of? Then you'll love this book. Stupid, you're always supposed to say I love you back. There you are. I've been looking for you. This is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. And this book has gripped me in my very soul for the last week. I read this whole book in 2 days and it was so good. It was so good. And if you look up on my shelf right here, you'll see I also have the second one, which I already read in 2 days. I told myself not to and I couldn't help myself. If you guys would be interested in me doing videos on the rest of the books in the series, please let me know because I am going to be reading it and probably very fast. So definitely leave a comment below and let me know. So this book came out a few years ago. I cannot believe that no one else recommended it to me because it was so good. It has been a long time since I have loved a book this much, especially something that's so high fantasy. Something I personally always struggle with is when books get too fantastical and it feels like the writing almost can't keep up with the lore and everything. So I am really happy with this book. So let's get into it. A Court of Thorns and Roses is a fantasy novel about a girl, Feyre, who is kidnapped into the fairy realm for killing a fairy. While living in the Spring Court, she learns to correct a lot of her prejudices against the fairies, and she falls in love and faces the deceiver. So right off the bat, the first chapter, we meet Feyre hunting in the woods. One of the first things we learn is that her and her family are on the brink of starvation, and she is responsible for making sure that they have food throughout the winter. While she's in the forest, she spots a deer finally, as she has gone deeper and deeper into the woods. And when she spots this deer, she also spots a humongous wolf. She says it's the size of a pony with huge, knowing amber eyes. She has to convince herself that it's not a fae. She pulls out her ash arrow, which is meant to kill fairies. She pulls it out, telling herself it's not a fae, it's not a fae, it's not a fae, and she shoots it. So she kills this wolf, right, this huge wolf, and is able to take the deer. She makes sure that she skins the wolf so she can sell the pelt and takes the deer for the meat. Feyre is completely this self-sustaining character from page 1, and she is making sure that she can feed her family and get them money with the pelts. And when she gets back home, she has spent all this time in the forest. She can finally come home to feed her family, and in the very first interactions between her and her two sisters, Nesta and Elaine, and her dad, we see that she is providing for them and they seem pretty ungrateful for everything. We know that Feyre's family has fallen from a much wealthier position and now they are stuck in this little hovel, right, in some small village. And Elaine is more kind of timid, right? She's kind of like the nice sister of the three of them, and you have Nesta, who's kind of stone cold-hearted, and she doesn't dare get her nails dirty, so on. But something else we learn really early on is that Feyre promised to her mother on her deathbed that she would look after and protect her family. I hear that promise I made 11 years ago as she wasted away on her deathbed. Stay together and look after them. In our world, we'd forgotten the names of our gods. A promise was law. A promise was currency. A promise was your bond. And so here we see that Feyre takes this promise to her mom incredibly seriously. You know, her word is her bond. And even though she kind of hates it, she does it for herself and for them. And chapter 3 ends with Feyre saying that there is no such thing as a better life out there, that they shouldn't have any hope. And these first couple chapters are incredibly important in shaping who Feyre is right now, because again, with this really strong character growth that we have in the novel, it's really important to understand that she truly is coming from nothing. It's really important to see in these earlier chapters that she's very cynical and unhappy. In these beginning chapters, we also hear little sprinklings about the Fae, you know, the High Fae, the treaty, the war. We learn very few things, but just enough that you have an idea that the Fae are known to humans. They haven't seen fairies in 5 centuries since the war, and we have this premise that fairies are these incredible beings that could shred you to ribbons in the blink of an eye. And they have all this lore about how they are hateful and they'll eat you alive, and they're these great evil beings that keep themselves on the other side of this magical wall. We also learn that this war was because a lot of humans were enslaved to the Fae, and so people rose up against the Fae to win their freedom, and that's why they're separated. And after learning some of these things, Feyre's in the market. She's selling these pelts from the animals that she's killed. Her family has been eating venison. They're finally working their way towards a better place. And so we are ending this chapter on what is meant to be a much happier note. You know, she's bringing home this money for her and her family after finally getting some food in their bellies and all this stuff. And we're finally starting to feel just a small sense of lightness kind of in their house. And then the chapter ends with their door being ripped off, and there's a large, shadowy figure in the doorway. The beast had to be as large as a horse, and while his body was somewhat feline, his head was distinctly wolfish. I didn't know what to make of the curled, elk-like horns that protruded from his head. But lion or hound or elk, there was no doubting the damage his black, dagger-like claws and yellow fangs could inflict. And this right here is our introduction to Tamlin. We don't know it yet, okay? But you know it, I know it, it's Tamlin, okay? And he comes and he's screaming, murderers, who killed him? Who was it? Huge, scary beast. You know, these girls and these humans have been told their entire lives that their lives could be wiped away if a fairy came into contact with them. So they are, of course, scared out of their pants. Feyre is trying to stand there and stand up for them, and she stands there with her hunting knife, even though she knows it would mean nothing if he wanted to kill her. She knows that she actually wouldn't be able to kill him, but she's going to stand there and try. And this is something that we will see page after page with her, is that she will stand up for the people that she loves and cares about, no matter what, no matter what. That stays constant through every page for the whole book, and I love that. I love it. And so she admits that she killed the wolf in the woods, to which the fairy says that it was his friend, and that the price for killing a fairy unprovoked, the price for this is that he can either take her life or she can give up the human world and live with him in Prythian, which is the northern part of the country where all the Fae live. The only reason she is able to convince herself to go with them is that he promises that he won't harm their family, that this is true to the treaty. And so she trusts him just enough to leave with him. And of course, this is where we get to our first real important piece of the book, now that she's being taken to the fairy realm. And we learn right away when she arrives at this huge, castle-like manor, we learn that this beast is Tamlin. And everyone wears a mask, and this is part of the mystery, right? She arrives and Tamlin has to convince her to eat something. You know, she's incredibly scared, and building trust between her and him and Lucien, who is Tamlin's emissary, they need to spend a lot of time building that trust because Feyre is incredibly scared. And the author always makes it feel like she's very much being pressed into a corner. She's always looking for a way to escape, a knife. You know, she wears pants instead of a dress to make it easier for her to flee. Tamlin continues to make it clear to her that this is not a prison. I brought you here so you could live this life despite your betrayal. It's really interesting to see their first interactions because it's very tense and a lot of things don't make sense. This entire world is a mystery. And we meet Lucien right away. He is incredibly angry at Feyre for killing their friend, of course. And Feyre continues to have this fear that they could murder her. She killed someone who was essentially a part of their family, and now she lives with them and she has to live with that guilt of killing them. And it's something that weighs on her and instills a lot of fear in her for a large portion in the beginning of the book. Feyre is brought to her room. She has a chambermaid. She's bathed and clothed and invited to dinner, essentially becoming part of the household very, very quickly. And she's invited down to dinner. She's still incredibly uncomfortable. There is, of course, this tension from Feyre killing. His name is Andrus, we learn. And there's all this tension, and yet there is a lot of talk of flirting and flattery, and they're asking her are you in love with this man from your village? And they want to know about her love life. Tamlin's trying to compliment her in some really weird ways, which is suspicious because she just killed one of their friends. And of course we learn more about this later. A lot of this book is spatterings of information that you don't learn about until a lot later on. It's very cryptic, which I did enjoy. But this is one of those moments where things feel off, and it's very hard to know why. And I even left a note when I was reading it. I'm thinking this must tie into a greater plot point with the way Lucian has danced around the topic of the flattery, love, and romance. And I even wrote that down, like I was like, this is very off-putting. As we keep reading, we learn that there is a blight that is going across Prythian. Some sort of sickness, some sort of ailment in the magic. We don't get very many details about it from anyone. And all we know is that there is a magical blight in the land, and it has cursed everyone in this part of the continent in Springcourt that they all have to wear masks. Tamlin wears a mask, Lucian's mask is a fox mask, and everyone in the entire court wears masks. And they haven't seen each other's faces in 50 years almost since this blight has started. You would think some deep ancient magic that would cause this sickness across the land would kill crops and dull their high powers, but not give them masks. And I left myself another note, and my initial theory was that some ancient magician who hates fairies must be doing this, because it's very, very personal to have them wear masks as part of this blight. It has to be someone who has a personal vendetta against the fairies. But I guess we'll find out. There's a generous amount of hospitality and friendliness from Tamlin. He asks if she will go for a ride with him. Is there anything that he can do for her? Would she like to go for a walk? And it's very weird. And you continue to have this feeling that something is amiss. As we continue to go, we learn that Feyre can't read. That when her family fell from wealth, she didn't learn how to read. And so he offers to help her learn how to read. And we're getting to a point where it feels very Beauty and the Beast. She's been kidnapped, and I'm just imagining that scene where Belle is sitting down teaching him how to read, and they're like slowly falling in love. I'm picturing it. It's all coming together in my head how this is gonna go now. And even though Feyre has become just slightly more comfortable, she is still trying to think of ways to escape. She needs to get back to her family, make sure they're okay. She's feeling this guilt that she is here and she's eating these meals and sleeping warm and comfortably while her family starves. She goes after this creature who is meant to be able to answer any question that you could give it. And Lucian, which she doesn't know if it's out of spite or if just because he truly wants her gone, but he tells her that how to catch this creature so that way she can ask it how she can go back home. She traps it in a snare and she's asking it all these questions. She learns more about the blight, and the serial tells her that it is a result of King Hyberd, who is on the mainland. The serial says that the king was disobeyed by the deceiver, and that's really all we learn. And she tells Feyre that there is no way for her to escape. The serial says, stay by the High Lord and he will keep you safe. I loved how the romance was written in this book. It is very slow growing, and Feyre kind of has to grow past these thoughts that she's had, thinking that Fae are evil and terrible, and she's feeling this guilt about her family, and so there's a lot of reservations from her as this romance is getting sparked. Tamlin's trying to be incredibly nice. They're trying to get along, and you can see the tension slowly ebb its way down, slowly, and I like that. I like that it builds slowly, and I think it's a lot more realistic. It's a lot more kind of sugary sweet and not this hot tension that you so often read in young adult and new adult books. So I really appreciated how that was written, and it made my heart so happy to read. So at this point, we are about halfway through the book, and we still don't really know very much. Feyre is very much kept in the dark. Everyone around her is being so cryptic that we only have really vague ideas of what's really going on, which is what makes this so good and so readable, because it is so satisfying when you finally get to kind of figure this stuff out. All we really know is that there is a blight across the lands, there's a lot of monsters, there's a little bit of romance building, but we don't have anything solid to see the end point. Like, we have no idea what the end point is, what the goal is, and so you keep reading and you keep reading and you keep reading because you want to find that out so badly. We need to talk about Calanmai. Calanmai is this celebration where they imbue the land with magic. High Lord of the Spring Court is overcome with magic and chooses someone to do the deed with to imbue the land with magic. Okay, whatever. That's not even the important part of the chapter, okay? They tell Feyre that she needs to stay hidden in her room while this happens for a lot of reasons. And of course she doesn't listen. I'm proud of her for that. She walks around, she's looking through all these fairies, trying to figure out what's going on. And she never really gets to figure it out before she is pulled away. 3 random males that she has never met are dragging her into the forest to, essentially abuse her and so on and so on. As we get towards the end of the chapter, I felt my stomach churning at this. It says, one of them shoved me and I staggered, falling out of their grasp, but sturdy hands grasped me under the shoulders before I could draw them or hit the grass. There you are. I've been looking for you. I stepped out of the shelter of my savior's arm and turned to thank him. Standing before me was the most beautiful man I'd ever seen. We don't get to know very much about this guy that she runs into. He is very clearly a bad guy. He is emanating shadows. He purrs at her. The way he says things, the way he presents himself is very predatory, and we don't get to know his name. We don't get to know anything. All we know is that we see him, he saves her, says a few things that kind of leaves a bad taste in her mouth, and then he's gone. And then we get back to kind of the same storyline. Kind of like at the beginning of the book, we have all of these things happening. They're seeing a lot of violence as they have to kind of control their borders and kind of kill these beings that are coming in. And there's a lot of sadness around what's happening. And slowly we kind of see that there's more light. Her and Tamlin are falling deeper in love and they are enjoying their time together and all this stuff. Feyre finally admits that maybe there is hope in the world. She refers back to the very beginning when she tells her father that there's no hope. My father once told me that I should let my sisters imagine a better life, a better world, and I told them that there was no such thing. I never understood because I couldn't believe that it was even possible. And they kiss and it's so cute, and she says it's the happiest moment of her life, and that is such a big change. And it's one of those things where you're like, yes, good for you, Feyre, live your life, and it feels really good because she is such a likable character. And so it's really happy to see that she's finally starting to have this happiness swell and she's starting to enjoy her time in Prythian and with Tamlin. And of course, as any good reader should know, this is when things start to go south. We follow this up with they're having lunch together, so on, they're chatting, blah, 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 blah. And then Tamlin shot to his feet so quickly that his chair flipped over. He unsheathed his claws and snarled at the open doorway, canines long and gleaming. Because someone is in the house. That someone who is in the house, you won't believe who it is. It's the same man from Calanmai, this man who emanates shadows. He is sensuous, he is dark, he is brooding, he is that character that we've read so many times before. Evil, malice, but sexy, and he comes into the scene. This scene is hugely enlightening. We learn that this man's name is Rhysand, and he starts to talk about Amarantha, and we start to piece together that she is this evil she that everyone's been hinting at this whole time. We talk about the blight, and we talk about what she would do if blah, blah, blah. And we find out that she is Amarantha, and Rhysand works for her. He mentions that this she, Amarantha, is looking to call in her debt with Tamlin or something. Some sort of time is running out for something. Again, we don't get told very much. He's standing there and they're having this conversation with Tamlin and Lucien, and they've cloaked Feyre in this glamour so they can't see her. So she's there for this conversation but hidden from Rhys. They're having this discussion, and of course he notices that the table is set for 3. And so he finally discovers that Feyre is there, and this is when things really fall apart. He has this knowledge now that this human girl, Feyre, has been living with Tamlin, and he's so obviously Tamlin's enemy that we know that this knowledge of her can't be good, and he almost threatens to just kill her and break her apart right then and there in front of Tamlin, kind of as symbol to him for sure as to what could happen. This is horrifying not only for Feyre but also for Tamlin, because they have slowly fallen in love with each other. Things really start to move in a different direction now because other people know that she's there, and other people know that Tamlin has learned to love and care about her. And he begs Rhys not to tell Amarantha that she's there. And he does ask Feyre for her name, and she admits her name as Claire Better. She thinks of a name from, you know, her past, someone she knew once upon a time, in hopes that, you know, she's not endangering herself. And with this, Tamlin becomes so scared that he demands that she has to go back home. This thing that she wanted for so long until she fell in love with Tamlin, and now he's here saying it's not safe for her and that she has to go back. This is incredibly hard for everyone. Feyre is really upset, but she accepts the fact that that's the right thing to do, so she does it. As she is getting in the carriage, she is packing up, like ready to go. He says to her, he says that he loves her. He says it to her, and she doesn't say it back. She doesn't say it back. I cannot explain. I put the book down. She says to herself that she can't say that she loves him, even though she does, because she doesn't want to burden Tamlin with that feeling, with that knowledge that she loved him back, but they're not going to be able to see each other ever again. Stupid. You're always supposed to say I love you back. And it's heart-wrenching. And she returns back home. Tamlin admits earlier on that he's been taking care of her family. He put a lot of spells on their minds so they would forget the pain of her leaving. You know, this whole time her family's believed that she's been on this trip to see some long-lost family and all this stuff to keep her family safe and to keep her family safe from the trauma of her being taken. And we realize that for whatever reason, the magic did not work on Nesta, and she remembers her sister being kidnapped, and she's been scarred by the fact that no one else can remember that Feyre was kidnapped. She admits everything to Nesta. She admits everything about Tamlin and about what she's been through and about what's happening to them in Prythian, and they kind of grow this bond knowing that she has to be there to keep them safe. The pivotal point here is we know that she can't stay with her family. Right? She can't stay with her family while all this stuff is going on in Prythian. That wouldn't make any sense for the book. And what happens is we find out that name that she gave to Rhys, when she said her name was Claire Better, that this woman, Amarantha, hunted down Claire and her family and burned their home. And Feyre hears that their house burned down and that Claire is missing, and she knows that it's her fault. She feels this immense guilt for saying her name, and Feyre has this new awakening that she needs to find Tamlin and fix this. That she has now become a part of this, of whatever Amarantha is doing to Claire, and she has to do something about it. And she leaves and she goes to find Tamlin, and when she returns to the manor, it's torn apart and they're gone. And this is the point that I was telling you about. Page 290, where everything is turned upside down. When Feyre returns to the manor, she finds Alice, her chambermaid, who she has become, you know, sort of close and friendly with while she was at Spring Court. And there is this 5-page, 6-page long dialogue from Alice where Alice spills all the tea. Alice says everything. She tells all the secrets that Feyre and us as readers have not been told this whole time. Tamlin and everyone has been kept under this spell, not by magic of the Blight, but by Amarantha. They've been forced to lie to Feyre because the spell also said that they couldn't tell her the truth about what was going on, and that Amarantha has been keeping essentially all of Prythian kind of under her command for the last 49 years, and that her and Tamlin had this huge disagreement. She wants to be with Tamlin, and Tamlin has refused, and so Amarantha put this curse on him and his entire court of the Spring Court to wear these masks and be powerless. She's taken all of the High Lord's power so they can't rise up against her. She has all these clauses that Tamlin has to find a human woman who not only hates Fae and would kill a defenseless Fae, but then would also fall in love with him and say, I love you. She has all these ridiculous claims because Amarantha has her own past, a similar past, and she wants Tamlin to live out that same past of a Fae-hating, killing human who could also come to love him. And this is when we realize that if she had said, I love you back, she would have broken the curse, and it's terrible. And so as we're learning this monologue, you can kind of feel the fire build in Feyre as she realizes that so much weight of the curse was this entire time on her. And so Feyre finally builds up the courage to have Alice bring her to this place under the mountain where Amarantha has taken Tamlin and Lucien, and everyone else in Springcourt is now there with her. The deadline for Tamlin to find a human woman who loves him is expired. The cauldron only knows what Amarantha is going to do to them, so Feyre seeks them out. She arrives under the mountain to meet Amarantha and Rhys, of course, who is her right-hand man. And she makes a bargain with Amarantha that she would do anything to free Tamlin. Tamlin is bound by her side. He's silent. He doesn't look at her. And you can tell that Tamlin is very much reserved, that he is incredibly afraid of Amarantha. And he sits at her side, fully for sure, and very silently. So Feyre strikes this bargain with Amarantha that she may either answer this riddle or complete these 3 trials. The riddle that she gives her, of course, cryptic, again, very cryptic. And so Feyre wastes away in this prison cell while she waits for the trials and tries to mull over this riddle day by day by day. The first trial that Feyre faces is against the Middengard worm, and so it's this giant, disgusting worm that lives in this muddy, muddy labyrinth. And the trial is essentially, for her to not die, right? If she can survive the worm. And it's a very intense scene where she's being chased, and she finally, of course, outsmarts the worm, because Feyre is incredibly good at looking after herself and adapting and being that huntress that she is deep down from her past. And so she beats the Middengard worm, and once she does, she has this terrible break in her arm. It's explained as bones sticking out, a festering wound. So she's brought back to her prison cell with this wound, with bones sticking out of her arm, and no one to help her because Tamlin is in prison, Lucien is in prison. The whole court is at the whim of Amarantha and Amarantha's power. This night, when she's like 3 nights in or something to this festering wound, she knows she's gonna die. She's withering away. She is on her deathbed, having only completed the first trial, and she knows that she would do anything to save Tamlin. She would do anything to have her arm healed and to be able to save him. And of course, miraculously, Rhys, our deep, dark, brooding shadow man, appears in her cell to strike a bargain with her. He offers to save her life and to fix her arm so that she can continue the trials. And again, it's very cryptic, and he doesn't explain why. When she wakes up from being healed by Rhys, she has a snaking whorls of tattoos on her arms, and with a giant blue eye in the center of her hand from Rhys. And it's a permanent marking of the healing that he did for her, but also of a bond that is now between the two of them. Feyre has this realization as she's looking at it that Rhys has his own motivations behind it, to hurt Tamlin with this visible tattoo that now connects her to him. In the second trial, it's a puzzle. It's a puzzle where she must read this riddle and pick the correct answer, one of 3 answers. And as she's meant to be reading this riddle, there are giant spikes, fiery spikes coming down from the ceiling to kill her, and Lucien is in the pit with her, bound by magic. And they are both going to die in there unless she figures this stuff out. And believe it or not, she did not learn to read in this period of time, not very well. And so she knows that this shortcoming of her being illiterate is going to kill her and Lucien and Tamlin. And guilt is overcoming her. She is going to just pick an answer. She goes to reach for it with her tattooed arm, and she is led to the correct answer. Rhys has helped guide her to the correct answer, and this is when we get more inklings of kind of what this tattoo truly symbolizes, and it's a connection between them. And Rhys continues to work with his bargain and uses Feyre. They are together under the mountain while things are going on. He allows her to drink the wine that makes her forget through the trauma of what's happening under the mountain while she has to wait month to month between the trials and try and figure out this riddle. Finally, the third trial comes around, and it's horrible. It is the one of the 3 trials that truly matters between them. Amarantha brings in 3 Fae and asks Feyre to murder each of them with an ash blade. This is meant to be incredibly cruel and incredibly horrible for Feyre, as she is forced to kill Fae like she did in the very beginning to get to Tamlin. I can't even describe how this last trial feels, because it is written in a way that is meant to be incredibly damaging for Feyre, and it is. And she kills the first 2 Fae, and when she gets to the third, when they remove the hood on the third person, it's Tamlin. And then, of course, the cruel fate is revealed that she has to stab Tamlin and kill him in order to complete the trial. Feyre is sitting there, begging for some sort of relief to this trial that she's going through when she remembers so many of these cryptid things that are being said throughout the book. Again, bringing these pieces in from earlier in the book, and we learn that with the curse that's been laid on the land, Tamlin's heart is actually made out of stone and not flesh. And with this realization, she musters up the courage to stab him. And he doesn't die because his heart is made of stone. Ha! Thank the mother, right? And so Feyre has finally triumphed. She figured out the key, you know, the misleading to these trials and completed it, but Amarantha refuses to honor it. You know, she twists her words and makes it sound like she's doing what she said she would do and refuses to free them. And out of anger, Amarantha she violently grabs Feyre and goes to murder her, right? To kill her, to say that you have failed and that you didn't see that I outsmarted you. And in this moment, in this adrenaline rush moment, Feyre is thinking and she realizes the answer to the riddle. And it's love. And it feels cheesy, but it's written so well that it's not. And Feyre announces, she says, the answer is love. In this moment, the curse is broken. And Amarantha, out of pure rage, kills Feyre. Tamlin is heartbroken. He's on the floor, you know, crying, sobbing, so upset that she's dead, that she's freed them, and now she's dead. And Rhys is so upset by how this has gone. He was waiting for the trials to be completed too, because we know Rhys has his own motives, and he becomes so angered at seeing her die that he grabs blades and also goes to kill Amarantha. And there's this scene where they're fighting and Rhys is disarmed and Tamlin finally grabs Amarantha and kills her. And after this, Feyre is laying there on the ground dead. Feyre is dead. And each of the High Lords of the Seven Courts comes up with what is written as like a sparkle, you know, a light that is brought from each High Lord and given to Feyre onto her body. Rhys being the High Lord of the Night Court and Tamlin being the High Lord of the Spring Court, they imbue magic into her to bring her back to life. And she wakes up as a Fae. And so we've completed these trials. Amarantha is dead. Feyre is immortal, a Fae. And the book ends with her returning home with Tamlin. And you have this looming sense of darkness that she has been through so much under the mountain. And now they get to just go home together. And they get to be free and live their life. And Feyre admits at the end of the book that she's not sure what she's going to do with this weight in her heart. But at least they get to be home. The ending is so good to lead into the second book because you feel that things aren't completely resolved. There's still this heavy, heavy weight on Feyre and still this unknowing of what the King of Hybern could be doing and why he would have Amarantha in Prythian. And so it's a gentle end to part of the story, but we know that there's more. For now, let me know what you think about this book. Please leave me comments. This is one of the best books I've read in such a long time. Feyre was able to adapt to every situation and become a strong and lovable character in every part of it. And you have Tamlin, who is with her, and he is a great protector for her through and through. And you have Rhys, who is this mysterious, dark, brooding person who now has this weird connection with Feyre. And so there's a lot to unpack, and there's a lot more to learn and know in the future books, which is great writing. And I loved it so much. I love being able to read this book and be able to understand pieces of it and continue to have this mystery grow and grow and grow and then end with this incredibly impactful and like action-packed last, like it's just the last fifth of the book where these things finally come together. All in all, I love that book. I hope you guys loved it too. I loved it. It was so good. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. The next book I will be reading is To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini. The second book in the series just came out, so I'm really excited to get this one read so I can keep going. I love Aragon, of course, so I'm excited to read this. So I will be putting this video out in 2 weeks from now if you guys would like to read along with me and watch that. And if you'd like to get started on the next one as well, I'm going to be reading Iron Flame. I got this one in the mail a little while ago. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do a video on it, but I definitely do. I loved Fourth Wing and I'm really excited to read this one. So 4 weeks from now, if you want to see that too. So thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it. Again, tell me what you think of this book. Give me ideas for other books I should read. But until then, peace.